Hey all, hope all is well. This is the second video in the Road to GM series that I'm starting on YouTube. Again, Road to GM is Road to Grandmaster. It's been a great, serious goal of mine for quite some time to become a Grandmaster, and I took the plunge uh, and left my full-time job to try and accomplish that goal. Yeah, this is round two in this saga at the Bay Area International in San Francisco. I was very excited going into it because I well, it was the first tournament of the year, 2019. It's a few days after New Year's, and you know, with New Year's, you have new hopes, new promises, and everything is very exciting. In round one, if you saw the last video, I had a draw. That was a little bit disappointing. And this game, I was hoping to improve on that. Now, my opponent, Leon Piasetski, is an international master from Canada. Currently not at his he was not at his peak. He's a little bit older than he was when he got the IM title, I'm sure, and his rating was around 2,300 FIDE. Nonetheless, I mean, no matter how old someone is and where they are in their career, everyone's dangerous. Everyone's dangerous. I always say no easy buckets. Part of it is just like a basketball terminology, like. I play a lot of basketball, and like it was just something me and some friends joked about when we were younger. But everyone's dangerous. Everyone, for him to get to international mastery, definitely had to show a lot of different things. So a lot of different tools in the toolkit. So, anyways, without further ado, so he played open with c4. I played e6, d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6. And there are a lot of different ways white can go here. They can play, typically the most popular thing they do is they play the exchange. They take on c5, on d5 here, and go for a queen's gambit exchange variation, and there are lines like this that are very complicated. There's also the knight f3 move, just sort of keeping the tension a bit longer. There's even moves like e3, although e3 is not as challenging in this position, because if you want to play a queen's gambit declined, it's usually better if the knight goes to d2 instead of c3. I said I wouldn't get into the opening nuances, but I will explain this. So let's say like e3, bishop e7, knight f3, a6, takes, oh, sorry, bishop d3, takes, b5. So, and then let's say bishop e2 and then bishop e7. So the reason this knight on c3 is a little bit misplaced in these types of structures, and again, this doesn't have much to do with the game, is because this knight can be easily harassed by a b4 move at the right moment. So on d2, it's not as harassed by a b4 move, and that's actually a key thing. The other thing about the knight being on c3 instead of d2 is that when this b pawn is pushed, there's no great square to go to. If the knight was on d2, it can go to c4, and that makes a big difference, because then it can either e5 square, the a5 square, and so on. So these nuances are important to think about if you're playing Queen's Gambit with either color, really. Anyways, not what happened. Here, Leon played bishop g5, which is actually was a popular move like maybe like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and I did not have a whole lot of experience with it. Because basically the idea is that you're getting kind of an improved Queen's Gambit exchange, I think, because white hasn't actually taken on d5 right away. So if white hasn't taken on d5, then I still have this pressure on the center I have to worry about. I mean, and d takes c4 is a move, by the way, as I didn't do it, but it is a move. But the thing about d takes c4 to me is that it creates sort of an open skirmish in the middle of the board right away. And I kind of want to sort of lead into the game, have a little bit more methodical game. But d takes c4 is definitely a critical option. I'm sure white has many options. There's e3, there's e4. Honestly, I wasn't familiar with any of these choices. There's knight f3. In this position, a lot of times the pawn is actually going to wind up being, this is actually going to wind up being a gambit, because it's kind of hard for white to recover the pawn in a clean way. If you try to recover in a clean way with a move like e3, again, this knight on c3 is a little bit misplaced for impending a6, b5 situations. So, Anyways, and I'm just going to open the online database for a second here, just hitting enter. And I can see, yeah, bishop g5, this position has come up how many times? 62,000 times in the online database. So very popular move, but not so popular lately. Anyways, I played c6, e3 was played, and I played knight bd7. And essentially, I was sort of hoping that my opponent would go knight f3. Because back in the day, and when I mean back in the day, I mean like 15 years ago, it's even scary to say that, that I'm that old, but 15 years ago in my youth, I was very fond of the Cambridge Springs. So after knight f3, there's this move queen a5, and this queen a5 move does two jobs. It pins the knight on c3, and it also eyes the bishop on g5. So typically the line here went knight d2, because the threat here is knight e4 for black. So the line went knight d2, and d takes e4, and then bishop, and then again this bishop is hit by the queen on a5. So the bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, and then knight takes e4 and queen c7. And this line was, has been played. This was played like for I think about 100 years or so. And the dynamics of the position are such where white has more space, but black has the two bishops. And if black manages to castle, coordinate their pieces, and get a c5 break in at some point down the road, very promising. So this is kind of what I was looking for, is like a long protracted affair. And that's kind of where my bias leads at times. Unfortunately, I sometimes don't respond well when I don't get the kind of game I want. So anyways, I was kind of hoping for this knight f3, queen a5 scenario. Instead, he went a3, which is a really interesting move and kind of throws a whack into my plans, because now queen a5 doesn't make a lot of sense. The reason for that is that queen a5 now, at the very least, white can just go b4 and take more space, I believe. This sacrifice shouldn't really amount to anything, I don't think. I think I can just relieve the pin like that. And again, like white is a piece up. So all of a sudden, I can go for my queen a5 setup, and the position is different. So I was trying to think of structures I knew, just in terms of openings, because I have this triangle pawn formation in the center. I have these knights like this. And there are two openings that are kind of like this reminded me of. It reminded me of a semi-Slav, where you put the bishop on d6, like that. And it also reminded me of the, what is it, like a queen's gambit decline situation. I decided to play bishop e7. Not so sure how great of a move that was, but I thought, okay, let me go for this. So knight f3, h6 I played, bishop h4, and again, h6 is just a nice flick-in move. You give your king an escape square for later, and the bishop is not really going to take the knight on f6, so you're just giving yourself a little more space. And here I made a very, I sort of wanted the game to become dynamic, and I made a very controversial and essentially poor decision. This happens sometimes when you want to win games. You want to win them right away. It's important not to rush things. So I should have probably gone castles. That was the more prudent move. And then you could have seen a position like bishop d3, d takes c4, and just some type of normal position arising. Again, in this position, I can even go b5 if I want, but I can also go b6 and develop more modestly and put my bishop on b7. Instead, I played knight e4, which is controversial because for a few reasons. One, I'm moving this knight twice in the opening, right? Like I haven't finished my development, so moving a minor piece again is a little controversial. And secondly, I'm trying to transpose to an opening that I'm familiar with, and that's the Lasker variation of the Queen's Gambit, but here it's not quite the same. So essentially, bishop 8 takes e7 was played. Again, you want to trade those bishops. If you go bishop g3, I'm just going to take it like this and get the bishop pair. And, you don't have any h-file pressure, so not really justifiable trade. So bishop takes e7 was played. I played queen takes. And then knight takes e4 was played. And so just before knight takes e4, what I was envisioning was a Lasker position. In the Lasker, I'm going to back all the way up just to show you what the Lasker looks like. The Lasker, it looks like this. There's bishop g5, bishop e7, e3, castles, knight f3, h6, bishop h4, knight e4. And this is the Lasker position. The point is, again, there's this bishop trade, queen takes. And what's the difference here between this position and the position in the game is that I don't have this pawn on c6. And so here, knight takes e4 is not a very good move, because after the knight moves away, not only can I reinforce the center with f5, I can also play c5, the c5 pawn break. Now in the game, I know we're shuffling back and forth. Let me just go back to the game. This position is a little bit different because in this position, what's different? Well, I've played c6, right? And the other thing is white has played a3. The inclusion of these two moves favor white because the simple fact that white has covered the certain dark squares. So it's better dark square control. I don't have this queen b4 check idea in certain positions. And I've further weakened my dark squares because I played c6. So you can see that this d6 square over here is pretty weak. That's a problem. The knight moved away, and all of a sudden I have problems defending this pawn. But the bigger issue is that if I play f5, I didn't play f5, but if I play f5, white can give this check. And I have to block with my queen because moving my king to f8 or d8 is too nasty. And after this trade, c5 comes. And again, this is all a product of the inclusion of a3 for white and c6 for black. So strangely enough, I thought this a3 move was kind of innocuous, and it is for the most part. But in this specific position, my desire to transpose to this this variation of the Queen's Gambit was not working for me. So that's a problem, because after knight d2, I realized these things, and unfortunately, I realized them a little bit too late. I decided to play knight f6. Knight f6 is not a desirable move. Again, normally in these Lasker type structures, you defend with f5. Here I have weaknesses, and again, the c5 and e5 squares are weak. I was anticipating c5. I thought that would be a huge problem for me for a few reasons. One, my bishop on c8 looks really stupid. Two, knight c4, knight d6 is a very dangerous idea. So if I want to go e5, there's knight c4 attacking my e5 pawns, and then if I take on d4, there's knight d6 check. This would be really problematic. I mean, I can go king f8, but now you can play queen takes d4, and you can see here that black has very, very good dark score control, very good piece development. This bishop can come to c4. White can go king side or queen side, but I would just go king side with the king. And my position is really bad. So I can't even, it's just a problem, man. So after knight f6, white played queen c2, and I must say I breathed a sigh of relief, because I thought, okay, I might be, my pawn on e4 is attacked, but at least I don't have these major dark square weaknesses, because, again, after c5, I can't really stop knight c4, knight d6, and I probably have to give up an exchange. I was already thinking about stuff like castles, knight c4, I don't know, what are we going to do? Rook d8, knight d6. I was already envisioning having to give up the exchange in a position like this. Maybe not right away. Maybe I'd start with b6 or something like that. But the point was I cannot tolerate this knight on d6 long term. It's just not tolerable, because it's like an octopus knight. If you ever watch Danny King's YouTube channel, shout out to Danny King. This octopus knight is just controlling everything. Look at all these squares it controls. It's eyeing all these squares around me. So really problematic. So anyways, knight f6, queen c2, and again, the e4 pawn is attacked. And again, you see the inclusion of c6 and a3 even bothering me here. Because in other lines, normally I could just consider castling. And the point is, if I castled, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, I would think maybe I'd have this queen b4 check. But here it's hanging. My queen is hanging because this a3 move is actually a significant benefit to white in this Lasker variation. So if anything, one takeaway is do not go for the Lasker variation if you've included the moves a3 and c6. It's not inclusion in black's favor. So I went e5, which was an interesting tactical solution. The point was that the king is lined up against my queen, and if he takes on e4, I would still have some pressure. Knight takes e4 was played anyway. I played e takes d4, and note that the knight on e4 is hanging. So After knight takes f6, g takes f6. Controversial decision a little bit, but the point is that I want to maintain this pin on the e3 pawn. I'm actually retaining material. Now, if I play queen takes f6, I was wary of queen e4 check. The point being that I'm just losing this pawn on e5. I mean, I can play bishop e6, but after queen takes d4, I can't really see my compensation for that pawn. And a queen trade here would just be out of the question. I'm a pawn down for nothing and in dire straits. So after e takes d4, I pretty much am obliged to play g takes f6. And all of a sudden, it seems like I might be getting out of the opening alive. Now, again, I'm like 150 points stronger than my opponent. I should be getting out of the opening alive, but that's the scenario we have before us. So white castled to break up the pin, and I must confess I wasn't doing too much calculating, and I missed that this move was actually effective. Because I thought, okay, d takes e3, and I thought if f takes e3, I just play queen takes e3 check, king b1, and bishop e6. And all of a sudden, my position is pretty legit. I'm a pawn up. I have good dark square control. And if you develop the bishop to the most natural square, which is d3, I can actually castle queenside too. So I thought here I'd actually have a slight advantage. But I missed this move, rook e1. Very important move, just to ensure that white retains the pawn and does not have any weaknesses. Because the other thing that I was thinking about is after rook e1, I went bishop e6, and let's say you take with the f pawn. Let's just say, all of a sudden, my double pawns are actually not as bad, as they look because white also has weaknesses. So it's very important that white took with the rook because now all of a sudden I have 3 pawn islands and white has 2. What is a pawn island? Well, a pawn island is like a chain of pawns or a single pawn and that's separated from the rest. So you can see like white has that clump of pawns on the king side, and then white has a clump of pawns on the queen side. And I have 3 clumps of pawns. I have this 1 in each 6, and then 3 in the center, and then 3 on the side. So whoever has the most pawn islands is usually in a worse off place, or a better way to put it, whoever has the fewest pawn islands is in a better place. Because in the end game, less pawn islands means fewer targets. So that's the thing to think about. So all right, rook takes e3. I can castle queenside. And my king is safe, and I have reasonable places for my pieces. And I'm even a little bit ahead in development from the standpoint that my rooks are connected. My rook controls the d file. The issue is my pawn structure is garbage, and it's really difficult to try and get something serious when your pawn structure is garbage. So anyways, bishop e2 was played, developing that last piece. And again, you can see very clearly that white's just trying to get the rook to d1 and kind of chill. I need to try and figure out something quick before my pawn structure becomes a problem. So that's why I played queen c5. I thought, okay, where's my advantage lie on some of these dark squares? These dark squares are targets, particularly in the center, e5 and d4, and maybe I can move to one of these squares and create some havoc. I also thought maybe the c4 pawn is a target in certain lines, so I was already entertaining moves like rook d4. White played an interesting move here I did not expect. And again, this is a theme in this tournament. A lot of moves are played that I do not expect. That probably tells you all you need to know about how the tournament went. But queen c3, very good move. Actually, no, this move I expect is the next move. But the idea here is that just attacking my weak pawn, my pawn chain, this pawn f6, and I don't really want to push f5. Why is that? Even though it defends the pawn, it just weakens more dark squares. So again, if you push any pawns, you're weakening the squares adjacent to it. By pushing f5, I weaken the e5 square, and I weaken the g5 square, both the squares next to it. So that's the conundrum I faced here. So I went rook d4. The point was, you know what, I'm not going to weaken the dark squares further. I'm going to double my rooks, and that'll be that. Here was the move I didn't expect. b4. Very smart, intelligent move. I was only considering rook d1 or rook d3. And if he plays this, I can actually get something going because I could play rook d8 and I just get some play on the dark squares here. b4 forces my queen back to d6 to defend the rook. And now after c5, white takes even more space. and I went queen d7 because, again, I have to still defend that rook. Note that if I go queen d5, what's wrong with that? There was something wrong with queen d5. What was wrong with it? I think maybe it was bishop f3. Maybe it was bishop f3. Yeah, I think it was bishop f3. And the point is, okay, I can go queen c4, but after this queen trade and king b2, I'm not better here at all. And this rook is actually caught out a little bit. It's just a tough position. But maybe that was not their variation. I'm not really sure. It's been like 5 months. So anyways, I went queen d7. And after queen d7, now rook d1. And so what's the difference between this position and playing rook d1 right away? Well, if you played rook d1 right away, this c4 pawn still would have been a bit of a target, right? Also, I would have been able to double on the file with my rooks, not leading with my queen. And if I don't lead with my queen, then it means it doesn't get traded. In this position, by forcing my queen on this file and playing rook d1, I'm leading with the queen after the rook. And that means queens get traded if I take on d4. So again, I don't really want to trade pieces having these structural defects, and white's kind of forcing me to. Unfortunate. So rook takes d1, bishop takes d1, rook d8. I tried to, keep it going. Again, I don't want to trade queens here, so I really want to try to keep some initiative going. And then bishop c2 was played, and I thought I was kind of clever here because I went bishop f5. And the point is that even though my f6 pawn is hanging, it's immune from capture, because if you take here, I can play queen d2 check, and then the house just collapses. The c2 pawn is at c2 bishop is hanging, and then I just checkmate, right? This would be checkmate. So given that reality, white has to deal with that threat. The other thing, by the way, is bishop f5, queen f5, I would be happy to see, because my rook is the one that is controlling the relevant open file. Moreover, my queen would be active, so I'd already be attacking f2. I could entertain a move like queen d5 next, like here, and I'd have a little bit of pressure. Also, these pawns that are pushed on the queen side that white has pushed, when you push pawns away that are supposed to be protecting your king becomes more naked. So it's like the emperor with no clothes. So my king currently has their clothes. So if, let's say, just make a few dummy moves, h3, a6, g3, king b8, I just want to point out that my king is safer than white's, and then I can roam and try and invoke a weakness on the queen side, potentially invade. So let's say, again, more dumb moves. But I'm just trying to invade, and now maybe I might even get in because I have the a2 square to get to, and even the d1 square. Things to think about. So given that reality, white had to be a little bit alert, and again, Leon was alert and played rook e2. Very good move. The point is that, you really want to challenge this queen-rook battery, but you couldn't really do it on d3 because there were too many pieces there. So now you go to d2. That battery is threatened again. The battery's threatened again. Again, if I trade pieces, I'm in trouble. So I play bishop takes c2. I know I just said if I trade pieces, I'm in trouble, but I really have to trade that one. And after rook takes, I went queen f5. Again, trying to get active, trying to get my queen going, my rook going. But white just went rook d2 and put an end to that nonsense. Now, originally I thought, okay, after rook d2, I'm just going to shuffle rook e2, rook e8, and just chill, and then renew threats of rook e1. But here it came to my realization that I still don't really have anything here, and I have to be very careful. Because even in this position, there's queen d3. And what does queen d3 do? Well, on one hand, it challenges the queen, but on the other hand, it also entertains the ideas of queen d7 or queen d8. So let's say I don't take the queen. If I trade the queen, the ending is very drawn because this rook can start wreaking havoc on my weak pawns. If I make a move away from the battery like that, I can go just queen d7 check, king b8, and queen d6 trading queens anyway. And so the problem is that I really can't avoid the trades here, and it just works to my detriment. So I played rook takes d2, and then queen takes d2, and white has really succeeded in nullifying the pressure that I potentially had. Again, my pawn structure is garbage on the king side, and I do have active pieces, and white's king is naked, so I have an active queen rather, so probably enough to draw, but nothing more than that. So I went h5 just to defend that pawn. Again, I didn't want to trade queens because these endgames could be very dangerous. If queen takes g5, a move like f takes g5, and this king could already start walking down the yellow brick road very uncomfortably. I didn't even want to have to calculate this pawn endgame because it looks very, very dire. Again, White's king is getting to the center very quickly, and my pawns are a little bit too far advanced that they may become targets. So, h5, queen d6 was played, and this really, queen d6 is the last move that really put my position in sort of like, just sort of shut my position down, because I was thinking, okay, maybe white's queen is tied to these pawns on the king side, but queen d6 just says, you know what, I can just threaten perpetual check whenever I want, right? Because there's this queen f8 check, king c7, this kind of back and forth. Let's say I go a6. There's queen check, 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 and I just can't get out of it. So here, the writing is on the wall, and I pretty much just have to make sure I don't lose, because when white has at least a drawn hand, they're going to look for more. So I played queen takes f2, and then I expected actually queen f8 check, king c7, queen takes f7 check, king c8, and queen takes h5. And here white would actually be a pawn up temporarily, and I'd have to prove a repetition, which maybe would not have been the easiest thing in the world, because if I make queen e1 check, king c2, there's no queen e2 because the queen on h5 is guarding it. So I'd have to go for a check like this. And again, it's a draw, but it's not totally over just this second. It's a draw, though. Like, I was just thinking maybe there'd be some scenario like this, where white tries to maintain this h pawn instead of trading all the pawns. And as you can see, white has the outside pass pawn. What does that mean? It means that if the queens come off the board, the endgame would be losing for me and winning for white, because I would have to chase this outside pawn, and white could come in the inside, take the inside pawn, and then take the rest of my pawns. So very dangerous position. Fortunately for me, as I played queen takes f2, my opponent just actually offered me a draw, and I accepted because he was about to play queen f8 check and repeat, and that was pretty much the end of the road. So he actually offered me a draw in this position after queen takes f2, and that was it. Very uneventful game, only about 30 moves. I think basically the issues in the opening were a little bit too much to overcome for me, and I managed to get in, an equal position, but nothing more. So I think white had more opportunities in this game than black. I think I did play well after the opening debacle, but again, not enough to overcome. All right, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. Please, if you like what you see here, subscribe to the channel. Also, please consider supporting the channel by making a donation to the GM journey. That would be much, much appreciated. All right, catch you next time. Peace.